Greetings and welcome, I'm Ash, and today I think you should try Stardew Valley, a Harvest Moon inspired country life simulator and RPG hybrid that will have you create a paradise out of broken sticks and piles of rubble. It features some lovely visuals, a calm and relaxing gameplay pace, a unique cast of characters, plenty of activities for any type of player, and perhaps most importantly, enough content to keep you busy for dozens of hours. But before you start mining for gold and enslaving forest spirits to run your futuristic mega factory, you'll need to first rebuild your family's long abandoned farm. When you initially arrive, this task might seem next to impossible given that the farm is basically a bunch of weeds, rocks, and decaying trees, strewn about in what I can only describe as a bloody mess. However, with enough work and dedication, even this nightmarish hodgepodge of garbage can be transformed into something beautiful. And it is this process of watching something amazing grow out of absolute nothingness purely due to your own efforts that is perhaps the most appealing part of Stardew Valley. Unfortunately, trying to rebuild an entire farm is a rather costly business, and when you first arrive to town, you'll be as poor as a church mouse, so don't get any grand ideas just yet. In order to get some actual money, you will need to pick up and master one of the oldest professions out there. And I don't mean that one, I mean farming. Given that Stardew Valley is designed to be as simple and as relaxing as possible, the farming system isn't very complex. But there is a surprising degree of planning required in order to make it work in your favor. You have to ensure you clear out enough land for all of your plants to grow, you have to take time out of your busy in-game day to water them so that they may thrive, you have to protect them against weeds and crows or else you might just lose your entire field, and so forth. Naturally, each plant is also slightly different, so some will take ages to grow but give you a massive payoff, while others will grow constantly but only give meager returns on your investment. Choosing the right type of plant to grow, as well as the amount you're willing to take care of, is an incredibly important part of Stardew Valley. If you plan things out perfectly, you'll be able to achieve a nice and consistent growth, eventually even reaching a point where you can automate most of the previously annoying tasks. On the other hand, if you rush things too much and decide to grow way more than you're capable of supporting, you are going to be spending the majority of your in-game days as a high-functioning zombie, completely stuck in an endless cycle of work, sleep, and so on. Now, if all of this sounds complicated, don't worry, as you can easily get a grip on everything within an hour or two of starting up Stardew Valley. The important thing is to not worry about your profit margins and future prospects, but to instead just grow as much as you are happy to support. It might take you slightly longer to get to the endgame this way, but Stardew Valley has quite literally no time limits, so feel free to go as slow and steady as you wish. Just make sure you're actually having fun. The reason overworking yourself is a bad idea is because Stardew Valley uses an energy system in order to regulate how much stuff you can do in a single day. So things like watering your crops, chopping down trees, crushing boulders, or even fishing, all of this requires a certain amount of energy. While this might sound like a limiting factor that's only really here to annoy you, its purpose is to slow down the pace of the game so that you can spend less time milling around your farm and more time out in the world talking to the friendly locals. Much like Harvest Moon, from which Stardew Valley draws most of its inspiration, all of the people you meet have their own personalities and an interesting tale to tell. And much like the real world, everyone will be slightly wary of the crazy guy that smells like poo and carries around 50 cabbages for some reason. So in order to learn more about these people, you will need to invest some time into building up a relationship, either by chatting with them or just by giving them a small, thoughtful gift. Getting to know someone will probably take you a couple of in-game years, much like how it works in real life, but along the way you'll be rewarded with numerous unique interactions and plenty of ever-changing dialogue. As such, the whole process never feels like a grind, but more of an interesting journey of discovery. And speaking of characters, there are also plenty of characters you can romance and eventually marry, both male and female. The process is pretty much the same as befriending them, but with a couple of unique twists and turns thrown in to spice things up. Do bear in mind that marriage in Stardew Valley is nothing special, so if you don't feel like bonding with anyone, there's no need to worry about ignoring it, as you're not missing out on any extra content. But if you do decide to tie the knot, be prepared to spend a whole lot of time getting to know your beloved, their wishes, their thoughts, likes and dislikes, and so on. While I have very few complaints with Stardew Valley, there is one very big problem related to both friendships and marriage that I simply must mention. The guys are boring, grumpy twats. On the female side of the cast, you have a quirky scientist that is positively adorable, a struggling artist trying to make a name for herself while living in complete poverty, a teacher doing her very best to make a positive impact on the world, and my favorite gal, Abigail, who likes eating rocks. Yeah, I have no idea what that one's about, but it's there. As for the guys, I couldn't give less of a damn about any of them besides Fabio, which the game mistakenly calls Elliot, who moved to Pelican Town in order to reignite his passion for writing. I'm not even talking from a romantic point of view here, I'm talking purely from a "this guy is cool, I wanna be buddies with him" perspective. So what are the guys? You have a whiny guy that never leaves the house, as if this town needed two of us, a whiny guy that spends most of his time drinking, a generic jock character that only ever exercises and plays with his football, a doctor that spends most of his day working and whinging about not having enough money, and one guy whose personality is so bland I can't even remember what he does outside of playing a band. Stardew Valley was written and designed by one guy, so to see nearly all of the main cast this insufferable is quite a surprise to me. You would think that Concerned Ape, the developer, would have trouble writing women, but they're actually some of the best characters out there. As for the younger male cast, well, the best thing I can really say is they exist. I mean, they do eventually open up to you after you spend hours and hours getting to know them, but even then, they aren't someone I would see myself hanging around with. The only guy I ended up visiting frequently was Elliot, who at the very least was able to talk about more than himself and how hard it is to live in an idyllic village with magical forest spirits. So if you're hoping to marry some of the male cast, I am afraid you're out of luck, unless you don't mind constant whining, in which case you at the very least have plenty of choice. But if you don't feel like talking to people, you'll be glad to hear that you don't really have to. You can instead take up fishing, forage through the woods in search of wild fruit and flowers to supplement your income, or don your adventuring gear and head into the monster-infested mines. All three of these activities mostly play second fiddle to the farming and social aspects of Stardew Valley, but they are rather effective at staving away that feeling of repetition you get after growing the same type of crop on the same patch of land for the umpteenth time. Outside of being the place you go to when you're tired of watching turnips grow, the mines are also the only way for you to acquire the resources you need for some of the more advanced technology. So if you want fully automated sprinklers that allow you to be as lazy as humanly possible, you're going to need to carve your way through hordes and hordes of monsters in order to get to the precious ore. But if you're hoping the combat is going to be as strategic and action-packed as in the Zelda series, I am afraid I'll have to disappoint you once more. Stardew Valley, as I've said numerous times now, is designed to be as relaxing as possible, which in gameplay terms means that the combat revolves around one single button you constantly mash. You are still limited by your health and available energy, so the combat is not as easy as you would think, but it is fairly brainless and with very little in terms of weapon variety. If these sort of battles were the entirety of Stardew Valley, I would be rightfully angry, but given that they are purely a side attraction you undertake every couple of days, I am much more willing to accept their simplicity. It's still not great, but at the very least it is a nice little diversion every now and then. And for those among you that are as obsessed with efficiency as I am, there is one area of Stardew Valley designed with this sort of playstyle in mind. The Community Center. Early on, the community center will be a run-down eyesore of a building, but as you pour in expensive and exclusive materials, it will slowly take on a much grander visage, and eventually even end up being fully restored. Completely upgrading a community center is not something you could do within a single day, or even a single in-game year, but it is an excellent goal for us quote-unquote tryhards, given that it requires materials from every single element of Stardew Valley. So if you wish to upgrade a community center to the very end, and also collect all of the rewards you get for doing so, you're going to need to carefully plan your entire year in order to not miss out on some of the season exclusive requirements. Obviously, you can't just take multiple years to finish it, nothing will actually stop you from doing so, but completing it in the first couple of years is a nice little challenge for those players that naturally gravitate towards being as efficient as humanly possible. In the grand scheme of things, it really isn't much, but it is still a nice little addition that I'm grateful to have. Even though the Harvest Moon series has had a decade to perfect this type of gameplay, as well as an entire development studio working on it, I can comfortably say that Stardew Valley is the better example of the genre. Many of the annoying features from Harvest Moon have been taken out and replaced with player-friendly ones. There is a lot more variety in gameplay and farm styles, and most importantly, the endgame is so much more intricate and more ridiculous. But even if you disagree with Stardew Valley being the better of the two series, I think it's still important to celebrate its achievements given it was developed in its entirety by one single guy, Eric Barone. And personally, I had a great deal of fun with Stardew Valley so far, especially since it's one of the rare few games where it's almost impossible to miss out on interesting events by either being too curious or too lazy. So if you're up for a relaxing visit to the countryside and don't feel like stressing about being the very best, then you might just want to consider grabbing Stardew Valley. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. And I'll see you soon.